Well, I want to welcome everybody to tonight's awesome topic on intermittent fasting. I know this is a really hot topic for people right now and somewhat confusing, I think, because, should we do it? Should we not do it? And, I think the thing is that we just want the facts. So I have asked Dr. Rachael Van Pelt to come on and share what she knows. Rachael is a PhD. She got her doctorate and postdoc in integrated physiology and aging, and she's led many clinical trials for how many years? Over 17 years, right, Rachael?
Yep.
Yeah.
24 years. Yep.
23. Oh my goodness. So she's done research on metabolism, body composition, aging, obesity, diabetes, and sex hormones. And most of her research was funded by the National Institute of Health. So she's one smart cookie. She's also a very good friend. She also does individual coaching. So if you're somebody that kind of feels like you're stuck or you need some more information, you can find her on Facebook or Instagram at Dr. Rachael Van Pelt, and you can just send her a messenger, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of her. So Rachael, with that, what is intermittent fasting?
Thanks, Reagan. Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because you're right. It is a hot topic. Everybody's asking about it, and there's, we've known for at least 70 years that caloric restriction increases longevity, at least in animal models. It's very hard to test in humans because most of these studies will caloric restrict animals for their entire lifetime. And sometimes they'll start midlife and they'll see the same results, but they'll restrict calorie consumption by about 20 to 30% at least in animals. But what they found was a lot of so the way we feed animals, what most of the animals were doing when they would feed them is they would give them their chow. You imagine rats in a cage, and they'd give them their chow and they would just eat it all right away. So if you restricted their calories, essentially they were doing intermittent fasting because they would eat all their food in a short period of time and then they wouldn't eat the rest of the day. So it became hard to really tease out the difference between intermittent fasting and caloric restriction, right? Just reducing the number of calories they ate. But what we found is that it's the number one way to increase longevity in animals. And it's been studied all the way from yeast to worms to in rodents and in primates. And some of my colleagues even tried to do these studies in humans, but of course, again, like I said, you can't caloric restrict humans forever. It's still the length of the study, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever. And but anyway, intermittent fasting can be any number of things. It can be simply, skipping some meals. It could be eating every other day. It could be prolonged periods of fasting. It could be a day, 3 days, a week. So intermittent fasting means a lot of different things, and so when you ask what is intermittent fasting, the short answer is it's kind of all over the place right now. There's lots of different ways to fast, but the entire reason for it has been to essentially to improve biomarkers of aging or increase longevity. And the jury's still out actually as to whether or not it is, even most of what we found in animals translates to humans, but we're starting to do those studies. And we do know, for example, that Okinawans, who are one of the many places in the world where we have a high number of centenarians or people living very long years and having a high quality of life, that one of the practices that they have is a practice called Hari Hachi Bu, and I'm sure I'm butchering that, but it basically means they stop eating when they're 80% full. And so by design, they're actually caloric restricted most of their life, because that's just their practice. And that's one of the reasons we think that may be contributing to their longevity. So intermittent fasting is a hot topic when it comes to healthy aging and in trying to find ways to improve people's longevity and their health span, the number of years that they maintain a high quality of life.
So a lot of people think, gosh, should I try this? I mean, why or why not should somebody look into intermittent fasting?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it really, for a lot of people aren't really necessarily interested in it for longevity. Are they? Most of us aren't going around thinking, yeah, I want to live to be 100, 120. There are some people out there, definitely, but there's a lot of different reasons why you might try intermittent fasting. There's different forms of intermittent fasting. We can get into the details of those in a minute, but it really depends on the outcome you're after. There's plenty of research in the obesity arena looking at intermittent fasting, like every other day feeding, skipping meals, that type of thing, of course, for decreasing body weight. And of course, one of the side effects of intermittent fasting is increased mental acuity and clarity and that kind of thing. But then the other major reason for doing intermittent fasting, besides say weight loss or hoping that it's going to increase your lifespan or your longevity, is disease prevention. And interestingly, most of so not only do we see increased lifespan in rodents and other animals that are caloric restricted or do have periods of intermittent fasting, but we also see huge improvements in a wide array of biomarkers of aging. We see improvements in blood glucose homeostasis, so in diabetes prevention. We see improvements in mobilization of fatty acids. People develop ketones or ketone bodies. You've probably heard of keto diet, and you'll have to save that topic for another day because that's a big one. We see changes in hormones like leptin and adiponectin, which regulate our hunger and our satiety signals and our fat metabolism. We see, as I mentioned, improvements in mental acuity, alertness, and so those and all of those changes that are going on in the brain then contribute to reductions in neurologic disorders. So we think that intermittent fasting probably is improving things like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease progression. And then what I mentioned, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all the usual markers of cardiovascular disease. We see improvements in things like blood pressure, cholesterol levels, triglycerides, that kind of thing. And then cancer. Cancer is a big one. That's a big area where they're noticing, because we noticed first in animals that they had improvements in slowing of progression of tumor growth and in animals, that cancer models of animals. But then not only did intermittent fasting help to slow growth of cancer tumors, but it also improved improved effectiveness of chemotherapy treatment and slowed the progression of other cancerous tumors, so metastasizing of the cancer. So that's another huge area where intermittent fasting is potentially very beneficial. And there's some scientists like Walter Longo, who's doing studies on the fasting mimicking diet in cancer. They're trying to give that to cancer patients in conjunction with their chemotherapy treatment. So there's lots of different reasons that intermittent fasting would be highly beneficial for delayed progression of lots of diseases and most of what we would call age-related diseases that are totally preventable, like diabetes and cardiovascular disease.
Wow, it's such a opposite of eat 6 meals a day, some of that came out. So obviously, I think a lot of people that are tuned in probably are thinking, well, I'd love to lose some weight at the beginning of the year. So my question is how long does somebody do intermittent fasting for? Is it like a stage, or is it something they do forever, or how do they do it?
And that's a great question. And the short answer is we actually don't know. We don't have good studies that have given us kind of a dose response relationship, like how they have really studied in humans how long, how many days, how many days per month or how many months per year and that kind of thing. Lots of people are out there trying it on their own, trying different things, seeing what works. The idea behind the theory behind intermittent fasting, of course, is that, back when we were hunters and gatherers, foragers and stuff, our bodies evolved to operate, on feast or famine, right? We didn't always have food just nonstop 24/7. And the idea is that, we naturally need periods of not eating. And the most natural period is at night. Right? And while we're sleeping. But as our environments evolved and we stay up later, we snack at night in front of the TV and later, and we wake up earlier and earlier, and we eat breakfast as soon as we wake up, that kind of thing.
We get home at 9 o'clock from the kids' soccer practice.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just, our fasting period at night has shrunk so much. And that's problematic because during the night, that's when there's a lot of checks and balances going on in our metabolism, and we need a period of fasting. So at the very least, I always tell people, start with, a good long period of fasting at night when we're sleeping. Stop eating after dinner. And even if your dinner's late, like, you don't, just avoid the snacking until midnight or 1 or whatever time you go to bed, and try to stop eating early. And then, and then not start, shoving food in our mouths as soon as we wake up. I used to never be a big fan of skipping breakfast because I think it's a great meal of the day to give us our energy. But, sometimes just delaying that, maybe a couple hours after we wake up, because our hormones, our stress hormones and everything, our blood glucose and all that is undergoing a lot of change from when we wake up to when we break fast, which is the whole
breakfast.
Breakfast.
Right.
So the good place to start is simply giving your body enough time at night to, metabolize all the foods you ate throughout the day, go through its checks and balances. And then depending on if you, are battling different kinds of diseases and things like that, it's really, then you might start tinkering with they do lots of different durations, like shortening the window that you eat during the day, say only eating for 8 hours, and then the other 16-hour, a 16-hour fast. So then you can, well, that's a real doable intermittent fasting, and way easier than, say, trying to do a 3-day, water fast or something like that.
Yeah. So that's where you see a lot about the 8-6 and the 16-8.
Right.
So can you explain both of those? I know you just.
Yeah. So, and for a lot of people, just doing 12-12, going 12 hours without eating at night is a good place to start, and only eating for 12 hours during the day, not eating, like maybe your last, you're done eating by 7 o'clock at night, and you don't eat until 7 o'clock in the morning. That's a good place to start. But an 18-6 would be, or 16-8 or whatever, any kind of combination would mean 16 hours of fasting, 16 hours of not eating, and then, only eating for 8 hours during the day. So for a lot of people, it is the easiest to skip a breakfast and do most of their eating between, say, noon and 8 p.m. But everybody's different, everybody's schedule is different, but I think that, you can try different things that are really beneficial.
So obviously eating the right things are just as important, if not more important, when you're doing intermittent fasting. So you can't just eat whatever you want, only, if you're eating in that window. So, I know we have our Shred 10 program and our One Simple Change program that kind of goes along those guidelines. Will you share more about kind of what people should be thinking about and how our programs, our lifestyle programs, kind of fit into a natural intermittent fasting lifestyle?
Yeah, absolutely. Because intermittent fasting, I think it's easy to get all caught up in the latest fad, whether it be keto or paleo or Whole30 or, there's so many diets out there, and and intermittent fasting is kind of the new thing, but it's new, but not. We've known about the benefits of caloric restriction for, nearly a century, but what you're putting into your body every day is so much more critical than just worrying about calorie intake, obviously, and fasting or feeding or fasting. We've got to get lots of fruits and vegetables into our body every day, way, way, way more than people aren't even coming close. And I think that the Juice Plus, the plant powders in a capsule are just such an easy way to get that in. And then the Shred 10 is all about getting rid of, processed foods, caffeine and alcohol and lots of sugar, and, in implementing exercise. I failed to mention, which, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention exercise, because exercise does most of the same things that intermittent fasting does for, all of the biomarkers of aging that I'm talking about. But it doesn't, what is interesting is exercise doesn't increase longevity in animals. That's why there's some differences between caloric restriction and exercise when it comes to longevity, but all of those biomarkers are so important. So exercise and part of the Shred 10 is stopping eating at 6 p.m. And I love that. I find it hard to do that because my kids have soccer and stuff, and we eat later, and I often don't stop eating till 8. But then I just stretch it a little bit later in the morning to get a little bit longer fast. So yeah, it's intermittent fasting's just it's a wonderful way to improve health, but what we put in our body, all of those nutrients from the foods that we eat, and the Juice Plus capsules and the complete shakes are just such a great way to round out that.
Yeah, thinking nutrient dense, calorically restricted, but nutritionally dense.
Very dense, yes.
What we really are striving for, and Juice Plus just makes that super easy. So
absolutely.
Is there anything else that you think people, should know about intermittent fasting?
Wow, I think we've really covered a lot. There's the other thing I think that's out there, I think I alluded to, I didn't really go into, was the fasting mimicking diet. And because fasting's so hard for people, even though it's beneficial for, say, combating cancer or MS, a lot of these neurologic disorders, there've been a lot of research that's been trying to do fasting mimicking, which is really a caloric restriction, doing this like a few days every month, that's reduced calories, reduced sugar, but it's higher fat, high unsaturated fat. It's interesting because they're trying to basically get people ketotic, and and like I said, we can go into the whole, keto or whatever in another talk. But I think, there are different ways to try to mimic fasting. But honestly, I believe that the simplest thing that people can do is just extend the number of hours that they don't eat at night when they're sleeping, and just get rid of that late night snacking, and really concentrate good nutritious foods in the period that you're eating throughout the day.
Is there anybody that should not do intermittent fasting?
Yeah, definitely avoid it if you're pregnant. You have to talk to your doctor about it if you've got any kind of ongoing disease. cancer, like I said, there's a lot of people doing this kind of research, but it's still kind of cutting edge, and it's not something to play around with, like true fasting, true skipping, meals for days on end. And even the every other day feeding is where you eat one day, eat as much as you want one day and nothing the next. It can be real problematic for people and athletes. It can affect performance, although intermittent fasting there may be some use for that in enhancing performance. Again, a topic for another day, but mostly anybody who's pregnant or has any kind of severe metabolic disorders, thyroid dysfunction, things like that, should talk to their endocrinologist or somebody that can guide them if they want to attempt to do some intermittent fasting.
Absolutely. Well, I will post up in our Healthy Bodies Transformation Facebook group the guidelines for our intermittent fasting program called Shred 10. And if anybody is interested in getting started with that, we can help you get what you need, but mostly it's a lifestyle program. And just like Rachel said, most of it's things that we should be doing anyway. So anyway, thank you so much for your time tonight. I learned so much and really appreciate the information.
Thanks, Reagan, for organizing this. This is fun.
And we'll have you back. I know we're going to do keto versus paleo coming up in the next few months. So you guys watch for that.
Great.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.